On September 8th, workers at a car impound lot in Los Angeles, up in the Hollywood Hills area, noticed something that immediately put them on edge. They'd been moving around the yard, and a foul smell was coming from the section where a cluster of cars had been sitting. They followed it, and eventually, it led them to one specific vehicle, a black Tesla. From what's been reported, the car had been sitting there for around a month. It was dusty. It looked abandoned. The kind of vehicle you'd walk past every day and never think twice about. But the smell was strong enough that they alerted management and contacted authorities. And when the front trunk was opened, what Tesla owners call the frunk, they found decomposing human remains inside black bin bags. Just imagine that for a second. Concealed in bags, stuffed into that small front compartment. Now here's an important detail for context. The frunk on most Tesla models isn't a big boot. It's not spacious. It's a tight, compact area, smaller than what most people picture when they hear trunk. And that's part of what made this discovery even more disturbing. Because the only reason it could work, physically, is if the remains had been dismembered. And according to what investigators later confirmed, that's exactly what they were dealing with. Not long after, the remains were identified as belonging.
Please help us make 1,000 subscribers by the year end. Make sure to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and leave comments down below so I can find out what content you'd like to see, and I will reply to everyone. Don't forget to hit the bell to be notified as soon as the next video drops.
To Celeste Rivas-Hernandez, a teenager who had been reported missing months earlier. Celeste was last seen on May 4, 2024, in Lake Elsinore, California, where she lived with her family. She was 13 at the time she was reported missing. She was born on September 7, 2010, so by the time her remains were discovered in September 2025, she was just days away from turning 15. And that part is hard to sit with, because when the body was found, investigators say the decomposition was so severe that she could not be identified by remains alone. She was identified forensically through official methods like records, comparisons, and other forms of confirmation, because the condition of the remains made visual identification impossible. Investigators also documented what she was wearing, a black tube top and ripped jeans. Now, that detail matters for one reason: timeline. In cases like this, establishing when is everything. What was the victim wearing? Who were they with? What's the last confirmed sighting? What can be verified? And here's where the case takes a turn that has fueled a lot of discussion online. A video surfaced that appears to show a girl who looks like Celeste wearing that same outfit, a black tube top and ripped jeans, at a concert where D4VD is performing. The setting is described as more secluded, not like a wide-open crowd shot. And if that video is truly her, and that's a big if, because this point is disputed, then it would provide more substantial clues in the timeline of her whereabouts since being reported missing. She was reported missing in May 2024, and this would be evidence she was at the concert in August 2024, 3 months later. That matters because it establishes the timeline about where she was, who she was with, and what happened in between. Now, I want to be careful here. There are also sources and commentators who strongly argue the girl in that video is not Celeste, even though the resemblance is striking. So this isn't a confirmed fact. This is one of the contested pieces of evidence being debated publicly. Still, investigators did note the clothing found on the remains, and it's understandable why people connect those dots. Another thing people noticed when looking through social media, Celeste often appeared to partially cover her face in photos with the older male she was known to be around during the time she was missing. Again, people interpret that in different ways. Some say it suggests secrecy. Some say it suggests fear. Some say it's just how teens pose online. But when a case turns this dark, those details become part of the bigger puzzle. After the remains were found, investigators moved quickly into the next phase: the vehicle. They traced the registration, and the Tesla came back connected to D4VD. To understand why this connection drew such intense attention, it helps to understand who D4VD is. Born David Anthony Burke in 2005, he rose to prominence in the early 2020s through an unconventional path that blended internet culture, gaming, and music. He started recording songs almost accidentally, creating original tracks simply so he could use them in Fortnite montage videos without copyright issues. But those songs struck a chord. His emotionally raw, lo-fi leaning sound took off on TikTok and other platforms, reaching millions almost overnight. Tracks like Romantic Homicide and Here With Me went viral for their stripped-down production and introspective tone. The music resonated deeply with a Gen Z audience, tapping into themes of heartbreak, isolation, and emotional detachment. Despite his age, D4VD was often described as quiet and introspective, soft-spoken, reserved, and focused more on feeling than spectacle. That image stood in sharp contrast to how quickly his success arrived, as he went from recording music in a closet to signing with a major label and touring internationally in a remarkably short time. By his late teens, he had built a global fan base, released EPs and a debut album, and shared stages with artists far more established than himself. Publicly, he maintained a low-drama persona. When investigators connected his name to the vehicle, That's the moment this stopped being a mystery body in an impound lot story and became something that hit national attention. Because now the case wasn't just about the victim, it was about a public figure whose name was tied to the vehicle where the remains were found. And from a common sense perspective, people immediately asked the obvious question: why would a car connected to you be the place a body is found? Why wouldn't someone try to hide ownership or distance themselves? But the truth is, ownership alone doesn't prove guilt. It proves connection. Within days, reports place it around mid-September, authorities obtained a warrant and searched a property linked to D4VD. They seized digital devices and other items that could potentially help establish a timeline: communications, location history, anything that could show movements, planning, or contact. And at the center of this case is still the same problem. The cause of death has not been publicly established. That's huge. Because without a confirmed cause of death, investigators can't definitively say whether this was a murder, an accidental death, or something else. Only that there was clear evidence of concealment and abuse of a corpse, based on the way the remains were disposed of. And that distinction matters legally. If someone died accidentally and another person panicked and concealed the body, that's still criminal, but it's not the same as homicide. If the death was intentional, that's a different category entirely. This is also why, despite all the headlines and online speculation, there have been no confirmed charges or a public trial tied to this case so far. And it's why investigators are still building a timeline. Because timelines don't just tell you what happened, they tell you what's possible. In recent months, the LAPD stepped in to shut down a growing theory online, a theory that had taken on a life of its own. The claim was that Celeste's body had been dismembered, that it involved decapitation, that it had been frozen and stored for weeks before being moved. These ideas spread fast. Social media filled in gaps with speculation, not facts.
Police addressed it directly. They said clearly and without hesitation that the body was not decapitated, and it had not been frozen.
That matters. Earlier, investigators had confirmed that the singer had made a trip to another property he rented in Santa Barbara, a secluded cabin. That detail fueled more rumors. People began to believe the body had been taken there, that the dismemberment happened off-site, that an accomplice helped, that a freezer was involved, that weeks later, the body ended up in the frunk of the Tesla. But investigators found no evidence to support any of it. Crime scene teams examined both locations, the Los Angeles home and the Santa Barbara cabin. There were no signs of a killing, no blood, no forensic trail, nothing to suggest Celeste died at either property, or that her body. They also said they do not yet know why the trip to the cabin happened. There is no confirmed link between that visit and Celeste's death. For now, that trip remains unexplained, not proof of anything. Piece by piece, the theories began to fall away, not because they weren't dramatic, but because they weren't supported by facts. And in cases like this, the difference matters, because what people believe online and what police can prove are often very different things. Because this case involves a teen, a public figure, and extremely disturbing circumstances, people have filled the gaps with theories. Everything from a fight gone wrong, to an overdose scenario, to claims about cryptic lyrics and coded messages. Lyrics and aesthetics are not evidence by themselves. They can be unsettling in context, yes, but investigators rely on verifiable facts, forensics, digital trails, witness statements, and timelines. Despite numerous headlines claiming David is facing imminent indictment and trial, this hasn't yet taken place, and won't until a verifiable cause of death can be established, tying David himself to it. At the moment, the case is still in that stage, building, verifying, pressure testing. Concerning legal and trials, the grand jury has been working behind the scenes to establish probable cause, to confirm the crime committed and by whom, before any charges can be brought against anyone in particular. A grand jury is a group of everyday people brought together to answer one simple question. Is there enough evidence to charge someone with a serious crime? Not to decide guilt, not to decide innocence, just whether a case should move forward. Think of it as the doorway to the courtroom. The grand jury listens to evidence presented by a prosecutor. They may hear witness statements, they may review documents, photos, or recordings. But here's the key detail. The accused person is usually not there, and neither is their lawyer. This is not a trial. It's a screening process. Everything happens in secret. That secrecy exists for a reason. It protects witnesses. It prevents suspects from interfering with the investigation. And it shields people from public accusation if the jury decides the evidence isn't strong enough. The standard is low compared to a trial. The jury doesn't ask, did this definitely happen? They ask, is it possible this happened, and is there enough to continue? If the answer is yes, the grand jury issues an indictment. That indictment is the formal charge. It opens the door to arrest, court hearings, and eventually, a trial. If the answer is no, the case stops there, at least for now. In the United States, grand juries are most often used in serious criminal cases, especially at the federal level. Their original purpose was to act as a buffer between the government and the people. A reminder that the state cannot bring major charges unless citizens agree there's a reason to do so. Long before a verdict, long before a sentence. The grand jury decides whether a name ever becomes a defendant at all. But before anything else, one rule still stands: innocent until proven guilty. That matters. Always. Still, even when someone is presumed innocent, questions don't disappear. They linger. And in this case, there are questions many people keep coming back to. For an innocent man, some things are hard to ignore. Why was Celeste never reported missing? Not by him, not publicly, not at all. Why was he spending time with a girl her age in the first place? That alone raised eyebrows. It doesn't accuse, but it does invite scrutiny. Why was there a burn cage on the property? What was it used for, and why was it there at all? Why did he make a mysterious trip to an isolated area in Santa Barbara County? And then there's the car. Why was the Tesla never reported missing? If it was gone for weeks, why wasn't that raised as a concern? None of these questions are proof. None of them equal guilt. But together, they form a pattern of silence. And silence creates space for doubt. In stories like this, that's often where the tension lives, not in what we know, but in what was never said. It's now reported that Robert Morgenroth, D4VD's manager, was questioned by During that questioning, Morgenroth acknowledged something important. D4VD was on tour at the time the body was discovered. And then came a statement that caught attention.
Morgenroth was reportedly heard saying something along the lines of this: that it wasn't his responsibility to contact police, that his focus was on continuing the tour.
Those words matter, not because they prove anything, but because they reveal priorities, at least how they may have been perceived in that moment. What's missing is just as important as what was said. It's still unclear what exact question he was asked by the grand jury. We don't know the full context. We don't know whether his comment was a direct answer, a clarification, or a response taken out of a longer exchange. So for now, this moment sits in the timeline, not as an accusation, but as a detail. One that adds to the larger picture, one that raises eyebrows, and one the jury, not the internet, will ultimately judge. From the investigator's point of view, the picture is already clear. They have access to every trail of evidence, digital records, timelines, locations, statements. They've followed those trails as far as they go, and where they lead matters. Despite public attention, there is nothing tying D4VD to the body found in the frunk. Yes, it's known he had a long-standing relationship with Celeste. That fact alone raised questions. It always does. But knowing someone is not the same as being linked to a crime. Authorities also know he was not living alone. Several other people were staying in his Los Angeles home at the time. Investigators identified them. They spoke to them. They expanded the circle outward. Friends, close contacts, and even his manager. One by one, they were pulled into the process. Not for accusations, for answers. These individuals were asked to appear before a But here's where the story tightens. One person, reportedly a young woman, refused to testify. No public statement, no explanation given, just refusal. And in the eyes of the law, that choice carries weight. Because when a grand jury orders testimony, silence is not neutral. Refusing to speak can lead to jail time, not as punishment for a crime, but as pressure. A way to force cooperation. A reminder that the system expects answers when the stakes are this high. So at this stage, the focus isn't on D4VD. It's on the people around him, on what they know, on what they're willing or unwilling to say. And in investigations like this, that silence often speaks louder than anything else.
Please help us make 1,000 subscribers by the year end. Make sure to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and leave comments down below so I can find out what content you'd like to see, and I will reply to everyone. Don't forget to hit the bell to be notified as soon as the next video drops.
Celeste's remains have reportedly been released to her family, and she has since been laid to rest. And while the internet continues to debate suspects and motives, the core truth remains. A child went missing, and she was later found in a way that no one should ever have to be found. So as this case continues to develop, if charges are filed, if a grand jury moves forward, if official documents confirm more of the timeline, I'll keep tracking it and updating you with what's verified. If you've made it this far, drop your thoughts in the comments, but keep it respectful, because at the center of this is a young girl and a grieving family. And if you want the next update the second it drops, you already know what to do. Subscribe, like, and stay locked in.